Hello, everybody. Welcome to Biblio Files, the little show on AADL TV brought to you by the Ann Arbor District Library, where we take a few minutes each week to discuss one book topic of our choice. My name is Amanda, and with me is Christopher and Lucy, as always. And today we have special guest with us, Jackie. Welcome, Jackie. Thanks for joining us. This week, we have a fun topic, and we may or may not have brought Jackie in on purpose. This week, we're talking about a book that involves animals, fiction, nonfiction, whatever you wanted to. Lucy, what did you pick this week?
So I had trouble narrowing this down because I've read a lot of great books about animals that I love, but I chose a book called The Book of Eels, Our Enduring Fascination with the Most Mysterious Creature in the Natural World by Patrick Svensson. And I loved this book. I thought that it was going to be kind of strange when I picked it up, and I became fascinated by eels. And I was telling everybody about eels. And they are so mysterious, as the subtitle says. What I learned was that all eels, whether European or American, are born in the Sargasso Sea. They all start their life there. And then they journey to fresh water, either in America or Europe. They just know which way to go. And they metamorphosize like 4 different times in their life while they're going to fresh water. And then they all make their way back to the Sargasso Sea to, at the end of their life, to lay their eggs. So it's like that. The animal part of it is fascinating, but the author is also alternating these scientific facts with portrayals of eels in literature. So portrayals of eels in philosophies and psychology and economics. So it's like eels have appeared in the popular culture of the time, going way back. It's really interesting. Freud studied eels for a long time because he was so fascinated by their sort of sexlessness and so there's that part. And then the last part is this author, Patrick Svensson, used to fish eels with his father when he was growing up. So he has these memories of time spent with his father. And those are sort of little vignettes that are speckled throughout the book. So you're getting this nature part of the book, and then you're getting this memoir part of the book. And it was just, as a package, it was so cool. And the eels part, I just, was like, hey, do you know about eels? To anyone that I was talking to. So I highly recommend it. It seems like it's sort of out there, but there was a lot in it that was really interesting. So that's The Book of Eels by Patrick Svensson. Jackie, what did you choose?
All right. So my pick, which was very difficult to choose, was Superfly, The Unexpected Lives of the World's Most Successful Insects by Jonathan Balcom. This is the title here. It's a brand new book. It was just published last month. But to give everyone a sense of my anticipation of this title, I will tell you that I looked back and I pre-ordered it and added the release date to my 2021 calendar in March of 2020. So before picking up Superfly and before pre-ordering it on an impulse, I had read another book by the author, Jonathan Balcom. The title is What a Fish Knows, which is the inner lives of our underwater cousins. And it was published in 2016. And from that book, I knew that Jonathan Balcom is an ethologist. He studies animal behavior in particular. And I venture to guess that he would not be afraid to tackle some unconventional topics in a book about insects, and I was not disappointed. Superfly is 280 pages of text with another 50 pages made up of notes, bibliography, and index. So it's pretty dense as far as scientific information goes. It is full of interesting facts and those wow moments where even somebody like me who's read quite a bit on similar topics finds myself wondering, how is that possible? And why didn't I already know that all at once? It's like those wow. The book's divided into 3 sections. It talks about what flies are, how they differ from other insects, how they live, and how flies and humans interact. So there are chapters dedicated to a bunch of different topics, but a few that stood out to me were insect minds and consciousness. It's one of those unconventional topics that I expected him to broach. And, there's, it's a sort of an emerging area in science to think about insects and lower level organisms as having, as beings, as having awareness, things like that. He also talks about flies as botanists, so their importance in pollination, which is something that, again, we're talking about a lot in the scientific world these days. Flies as parasites and predators, flies as disease vectors and pests, and the importance of flies in genetic research. There are some color photos in the center of the book that better illustrate certain flies that are discussed in the book. And yeah, it's a really great read. So why did I choose this book out of all of the many, many, many books about animals that I have loved? Full disclaimer, I do love invertebrates. You can give me slugs, worms, spiders, moths, flies, nearly any little creature that lives in my yard, and I will probably want to talk to you about it. So why this book in particular, right? I could have talked about any of those. There just aren't many books out there about flies that are written for non-scientists. And most of what you can find is strictly for identification purposes. So there's just not a lot. In fact, I searched the AADL catalog. We have a fantastic, well-distributed collection, and yet when the taxonomy term of flies, I only got one book that was comparable to this. Everything else was tying flies or flies in horror movies or kids books about cartoon flies. So why is it that we don't have a lot of books on flies? It's long been believed that beetles are the most dominant species-rich group of organisms on Earth. And just in the last couple of years, the scientific community has started to, in their effort to find and describe new species before they're lost to extinction, they're discovering that we're vastly eclipsing that number of beetles with a couple other families, particularly the ants, wasps, and bees, and the flies. And I think that on top of being a book that has the potential to change minds about what could be the most dominant order of animal life on the planet, it's a page turner of a nonfiction title. It's full of funny stories, quick facts that will make you think twice about your history with flies, including why you cannot possibly swat one, like all the mechanics behind how that works. And the author takes a very thoughtful approach to some difficult questions, such as whether insects are conscious, if they can feel pain, and if they are self-aware. So, full disclaimer, there are also some in-depth descriptions of the mechanics of parasitism and insects as disease vectors. So it may not be for everyone, but for someone who enjoys the darker side of nature and someone who's interested in the ethical debate behind the treatment of animals, it's an important read. Christopher, what have you been reading?
Well, I chose this book that I'd long wanted to read. It's called Alex and Me by Irene Pepperberg. So Alex was an African gray parrot, well known for his ability to distinguish colors, shapes, and numbers, and even relative qualities. And Alex died unexpectedly in 2007. So Alex and Me is really a memoir. Pepperberg talks all about her life with Alex, and she has a kind of unique relationship with him. She's supposed to be studying him, and she does, but I think she kind of begrudgingly shows her true affection for Alex. And so it's a really interesting story. It's a super fast read, and along the way, she really details her the obstacles that she faced with animal research and cognition, the sexism she faced, and the funding problems that she faced as well. So it's a great book, and it really happily blurs the line between what humans do with speech and what we think of as animals doing with communication, because Alex had just a walnut-sized brain, but he was able to communicate so much. And you also, as Jackie mentioned with self-awareness, there seemed to be a lot of moments where Alex was communicating an awareness of himself and awareness of others and what was really going on. So,
all right. So before we switch to my book, I have to ask Jackie one question. Had you seen the movie The Fly before, and did you think of that at all when you were reading your book?
No, I have not.
Okay.
And I think I know what film you're talking about, but I haven't seen it.
Okay. All right. No, it's just a very graphic depiction of a man who becomes a fly. Definitely.
Oh, yes.
I just wondered
yes.
Like, I don't think I could read that book without thinking of that movie.
Yeah. I think I've seen clips of it and it was too much for me.
Okay.
Yeah. But I can, I think a lot of people would like pick up this book with already having quite a few feelings about flies. It's not the same as picking up a title about, I don't know, something you like don't encounter on a regular basis, like a shark. You might have feelings about sharks, but you probably haven't had like personal experiences with them. And so I do think that changes how willing someone might be to pick it up, which is part of why I picked it. Because I was like,
no, that's a good
would somebody see that on the title?
No, that's a good point as far as like your relationship to the animal and like your relationship prior to encountering it again in a book.
Yeah.
All right. So speaking of cute and furry critters that Amanda loves, I chose a book that's fiction, and I chose it because it's about a dog. The book is The Friend by Sigrid Nunes, and it was 2018 novel, and it actually won the National Book Award for fiction that year. I have a love-hate relationship with a lot of the National Book Award titles. People either love them or don't love them. And this one, I loved it. I was drawn to it, again, because it had a dog. And the book is basically, there's a woman who is an author. She's a writer. She's in the literature scene. And her close friend and mentor kills himself. And she has to recover from that and understand his death. But then through a turn of events, she winds up adopting his large Great Dane, and she lives in an apartment in Manhattan where she can't have the dog. So the whole book is sort of her becoming friends with this dog, dealing with the dog, dealing with her friend's death, her own life, the literature scene and some of the other writers and that whole little hubbub of that scene. It's just a really, really, really interesting book. The woman's not always super likable, but I appreciated and really liked the fact that she was sort of like this. She just wanted to be on her own, doing her thing and writing. And then she's got this giant dog. And I also love that the dog was so big. It's a Great Dane, so you can't miss it in her apartment or in her life. It's constantly just this thing. I really, really liked the book. Again, I grabbed it because I had a dog in it and I just thought it sounded fun. It was a really good book. I really, really enjoyed it. So The Friend by Sigrid Nunes. Any final thoughts?
I loved that book. That was like one of my favorite books that I read the year that came out. And I think I went through and I counted the number of other books she mentions in that book. And it was like, it was in like 50 different or more titles, way more than that, actually. She's just like a book about an animal, but it's also a book about literature. But it was such a great book.
It's sort of, parts of it are sort of memoir-ish. And the author, she had been a writer for 2 decades. And this, after like writing for over 20 years, all of a sudden this book just like put her on the map. And she's like, I've been writing all this time, but this is the book. I
went back after that and I read some of her older stuff because I was like, how have I not known about Sigrid Nunes? So
yeah. Cool. Yeah, so you're not
Reading Superfly has added to my list of books to read, although, as I said, not all of them are about flies. Most of them are about other things, but it's still, I'm excited for what will now become a new rabbit hole to delve into.
Yeah. I think I remember, Jackie, when that, like getting a text from you, probably in March 2020.
Yeah.
This is coming.
Yeah.
There's an animal right there. We've got a cat.
Yep. My cat decided to join us for this episode.
Awesome. Cats and dogs to end it out. All right. Well, that's it for this week's episode of the show. Thank you, Jackie, again for joining us. That was a lot of fun. You brought some flies.
Thanks for having me.
We had flies, birds, eels, a dog, and then a bonus cat. Thanks to Christopher. If you want to go ahead, and we are on YouTube after all, if you want to show your library some love, go ahead, click like, click subscribe. Let us know how much you like what we talked about. Let us know what animal books you've read. Have you read books in fiction, nonfiction on animals? If you click the link below, it'll take us to the website. You can drop us a comment. We love hearing what other people are reading, just to kind of join our conversation. We'll be back again next time, and we will be discussing a book that involves a sport. All right, we'll see you then. Take care.